welcome back to our channel. You won't believe what these pennies sold for. Rare, historic, and insanely valuable. Watch now and subscribe. In a small corner of Philadelphia, where the clang of metal echoed through the walls of the U.S. Mint, the year 1982 stood as a quiet marker in numismatic history. Nothing out of the ordinary seemed to define it at the time. Pennies still rolled out by the millions, each pressed with Lincoln's familiar face and the dignified memorial on the reverse. Yet buried deep among them was a quiet upheaval, a minute transition that would one day become the subject of fascination, obsession, and fortune. As inflation pressed hard on copper supplies, decision-makers behind closed mint doors acted with calculated urgency. Copper was growing expensive, almost impractically so, and the penny, a coin of small denomination but vast production, had become a financial liability. Thus, somewhere in the early months of 1982, plans took shape to substitute the copper composition of the penny. The new plan was simple yet transformative. Instead of solid copper, pennies would be made from a zinc core with a thin copper plating. The changeover, however, wasn't immediate or straightforward. It was riddled with overlap, experimentations, and more importantly, unexpected errors. The U.S. Mint, caught between two compositions, copper and zinc, continued to strike both during the year. There were no public alerts or collector bulletins back then. Just a silent revolution within the alloy of a single cent, whose true significance would only begin to glimmer years later, somewhere far from the roar of minting machines. Decades down the line, a coin collector named Jonathan Reeves stumbled upon a worn but curious 1982 penny in an old family coin jar. He wasn't searching for treasures, it was a casual inspection on a rainy afternoon, sorting change while waiting for the storm to pass. The penny felt different. Its weight was odd, not heavy enough to be full copper, not light enough to be obvious zinc. But it was the lettering that caught his attention. The D mint mark from Denver was there, but the formation of the numerals was slightly off. The 2 appeared to stretch unnaturally, and the word Liberty showed faint doubling. Not enough to scream error, but just enough to whisper it. Jonathan's heart raced, not because he knew what he had, but because he didn't. He took it to a local shop, where the man behind the counter squinted under a magnifier. The dealer furrowed his brow and weighed it, 3.1 grams. A copper weight. But 1982 D copper pennies weren't supposed to exist. Denver had officially minted only zinc pennies that year. Jonathan leaned in. The man turned the coin in silence, holding it longer than necessary. Finally, with a quiet sigh, he laid the coin down and said, "You might want to hold on to this." That moment marked the beginning of a journey, a descent into forums, grading services, and historical archives. Jonathan wasn't a professional numismatist, but this single coin pulled him into a world of forensic analysis and obsessive comparisons. He learned about how the U.S. Mint had produced 7 known varieties of the 1982 penny, distinguished by composition, mint mark, and the size of the date font. He learned that 1982 was the only year in U.S. history to feature such a complex mix within one denomination. But his coin didn't fit neatly into any of the known categories. As weeks turned into months, his coin became the center of his evenings. He joined online coin communities, shared high-resolution photos, and sought insights from experts. Some brushed him off, assuming it was a weighted fake. Others leaned in, intrigued. The question remained, how did a Denver-minted penny with copper composition slip through in a year where all Denver pennies were supposed to be zinc? One evening, after yet another digital deep dive, Jonathan stumbled upon an article from 2010. It documented the discovery of a single 1982 D copper penny confirmed by professional graders. Only one. Graded MS-63, it sold privately for an undisclosed but speculated 5-figure sum. His hands trembled. Could his be the second? The coin's weight matched. The mint mark aligned. The doubt still lingered, could the weight be skewed by some fluke? Could this be a clever counterfeit with embedded copper? He sent the coin to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, holding his breath for weeks. The wait was excruciating, every email notification and mailbox check pulsing with anticipation. Then came the package, clean, compact, and inconspicuous. He unwrapped it slowly, sliding out the encapsulated slab. The grade read MS-61. The label beneath it sent his pulse rocketing. 1982 D. Lincoln sent transitional error. Bronze planchet. The market reacted like a struck tuning fork. Word spread through collector circles. Articles surfaced. Forums lit up. A second known example confirmed. Speculation brewed like a storm. What had once been a dismissed error theory now had physical validation. The coin world's eyes shifted, scanning drawers and jars for other overlooked examples. The value of Jonathan's coin climbed steadily. First, a $5,000 offer. Then $10,000. A collector from Illinois offered $16,500. Jonathan declined them all. The market's curiosity turned aggressive. People began questioning the mint's record. How had copper planchets ended up in Denver's 1982 presses? The most credible theory emerged from retired mint workers. During the transition, leftover copper planchets may have been mistakenly fed into machines designated for zinc striking. Because both types circulated simultaneously in Philadelphia, Denver's supposed all-zinc run made the anomaly striking. A penny from Denver, struck on a copper planchet, shouldn't exist. The physical characteristics became the focus of scrutiny. Weight was the primary indicator. Copper planchets weighed about 3.1 grams, while zinc counterparts came in at 2.5 grams. But there were other clues: surface sheen, ring tone, and magnetic resistance. The difference was subtle yet undeniable to trained eyes. Jonathan's coin even had the large date variety, matching the lone other copper 1982 D known. What made it particularly compelling, however, wasn't just rarity, it was the process of validation. It wasn't a minted announcement, a commemorative production, or a limited issue. It was a mistake. A perfect misstep in a bureaucratic process, unnoticed at the time but transformative in hindsight. The value of such a coin isn't just in the metal or mint mark, it's in the disruption it represents. In the months that followed, Jonathan was invited to numismatic expos, where seasoned experts asked to see his coin up close. It was encased in a thick plastic slab, a layer of protection over a fragment of monetary history. Offers reached $22,000, then $28,000. An auction house offered to feature it at a spring event, predicting bids upwards of $35,000. Still, Jonathan held on. Then came the twist. An anonymous submission to NGC, a competing grading service, revealed a third 1982 D copper penny. But this one had a small date. Panic surged through the coin community. The theory of a single, accidental strike weakened. Was it possible the Denver Mint had struck dozens, even hundreds, of copper pennies that year, only to have most slipped unnoticed into circulation? Collectors rushed back to their hoards, weighing every 1982 D penny they had. eBay listings surged. Pawn shops saw a flood of hopeful visitors. But even as more small-date 1982 D copper claims appeared, none were confirmed beyond the three authenticated examples. The third coin sold at public auction for over $40,000, further fanning the flames of intrigue. Jonathan, now a reluctant figure in the numismatic spotlight, stood at the center of a swelling vortex of speculation. He spoke at a convention once, softly, with the coin around his neck in a protective pouch. He didn't dramatize his story. He only said one thing that resonated: sometimes, the greatest value lies not in how rare something is, but in how invisible it was before you looked. Today, the 1982 D copper penny remains a symbol, not of error, but of revelation. It's a reminder that in an era of mass production, where coins are stamped in lifeless uniformity, the human element, oversight, change, indecision, can still slip in and create something miraculous. Its value now isn't fixed. It's rumored to be worth up to $50,000 in top grade, depending on demand and confirmation of total known examples. But the price tag is fluid, like history itself. What's not fluid is the fascination it invokes. A penny meant to be ordinary, tossed from pocket to pavement, became a talisman of imperfection. And in that imperfection, it transcended its face value, shedding its identity as currency to become artifact. Collectors still chase it. Forums still debate it. And somewhere, perhaps in another forgotten jar, another example waits, quiet, unassuming, just a fraction of a gram too heavy, a relic hiding in plain sight. In 2001, the rhythmic beat of the U.S. mint presses continued as always, churning out coin after coin, each with Lincoln's profile and the Lincoln Memorial stamped firmly on the reverse. It was a year without dramatic change in American coinage, at least on the surface. Billions of 1-cent coins were struck that year, destined for vending machines, cash registers, and pockets that would forget them as easily as they collected them. Yet somewhere in that ocean of copper-plated zinc coins, a handful were unlike the rest. Not marked by bold proclamations or commemorative fanfare, but by quiet, almost invisible anomalies that would later unravel with a depth few could imagine. The year 2001 wasn't one that collectors anticipated for surprises. The cent had seen its last design overhaul decades earlier, and its composition had stabilized to copper-plated zinc since 1982. There was no reason to expect anything unusual. But then, as so often happens in the world of numismatics, it was within that very expectation of normalcy that something extraordinary quietly slipped by. A few coins, minted under the same conditions, the same presses, and the same assumed oversight, began surfacing in hands that knew how to look a little closer. One such coin would eventually find its way into the life of a collector named Marcus Hill. A quiet man with a patient passion for pocket change, Marcus had long enjoyed his weekend routine of browsing coin rolls purchased from local banks. It was, for him, a meditative ritual. The thrill wasn't always in the finding, it was in the looking. Most rolls contained the usual suspects, coins scuffed and unremarkable. But one weekend, something made him pause. The penny was dated 2001. A Denver mint mark. It bore the typical design, Lincoln facing right, the memorial clearly defined. But when Marcus tilted the coin toward the light, he noticed an odd shimmer near the lettering of, "In God We Trust." A doubling effect, not pronounced enough to be cartoonish, but just enough to draw a seasoned eye. He flipped the coin over. The reverse had peculiar characteristics as well. The steps of the memorial seemed less distinct, as if doubled faintly along the bottom lines. It wasn't a normal strike. But what disturbed him even more was the coin's feel. It was weighty, off in a way he couldn't yet articulate. He took it to his home scale, 3.11 grams. That wasn't right. By 2001, all U.S. pennies were supposed to weigh 2.5 grams, the result of the copper-plated zinc planchets introduced nearly 2 decades earlier. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he weighed it again. Same reading, 3.11 grams. That weight belonged to a different era, before the transition to zinc. His next step was deliberate. Marcus packaged the coin and mailed it to a trusted grading service. He didn't share it online. He didn't speak of it at the local club. He waited in silence. Weeks passed. When the envelope returned, he held his breath as he read the label, 2001 D. Lincoln Cent Transitional Error. Struck on bronze planchet. The grade, AU, 58. He sat back, stunned. A transitional error, not from 1982 or 1983, but 2001, a year no one associated with metal shifts or planchet confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. The copper planchets should have been out of production for nearly 20 years. So how did a 3.11 gram bronze blank get struck in 2001? That question rippled through the collector community after Marcus finally shared his find. Theories poured in. One explanation gained traction: old copper blanks, somehow left over from pre-1982 batches, had managed to stay hidden within mint storage or were accidentally mixed into a fresh batch of blanks in 2001. It wasn't impossible. Errors involving old stock had occurred before, but the gap between the last copper planchet and 2001 made this particular instance extraordinary. As others weighed in, comparisons began. Photos of Marcus's coin circulated, drawing both skepticism and admiration. The doubling on the obverse was classified as a minor but unique doubling error, not extreme enough to be a classic double die, but sufficient to confirm misalignment during the strike. Combined with the incorrect planchet composition, the coin stood out as a multifaceted error, one part transitional, one part misstrike, other collectors began combing through their 2001 D rolls. Reports emerged of similar weights. A second coin surfaced months later, this one heavily circulated, and also copper. The weight matched. It was authenticated too, but the grade was lower, VF 35. The market began to stir. The journey of Marcus's coin transformed from a private anomaly to a collector's case study. Coin magazines ran quiet features about it, numismatic podcasts whispered its details in specialized episodes. Offers started rolling in. First modest, $3,000, then $5,000. As the coin's uniqueness became clearer and authentication ironclad, higher offers followed. One auction house estimated the coin could fetch $20,000 if offered at public sale. Marcus, however, was reluctant. It wasn't just about the money. This coin had become a conversation, a piece of mystery wrapped in alloy and struck without intention. More detailed examinations revealed that the error wasn't isolated to just one aspect. The die that struck Marcus's coin had signs of fatigue, leading some to believe it may have been a leftover die paired with an incorrect planchet. That compounded the story. It wasn't merely a stray blank. It was the convergence of oversight, aging machinery, and unnoticed transition. And as often happens in error coin lore, that convergence built legend. What truly set Marcus's coin apart was the depth of its implications. It challenged assumptions about minting consistency. If a 2001 D penny could be struck on an obsolete planchet, what else could have slipped through unnoticed? The mint offered no official statement. The error was too minor in public impact, too specialized for mainstream acknowledgement. But within the numismatic world, it was a quiet earthquake. Collectors began to explore overlooked modern cents with renewed attention. 2001 D rolls saw a spike in eBay sales. Digital forums buzzed with coin weighing tutorials. Schools of thought emerged around the potential for other transitional errors in late-date coins. It was as if Marcus's coin had peeled back a layer of assumed perfection. Then came the twist. A third coin appeared, but not from Denver. A 2001 Lincoln cent, Philadelphia minted, showing similar doubling and copper weight. It had been sitting for years in a retired collector's cigar box, dismissed as just another old penny. Its discovery reignited the debate. Could there have been more than just isolated error? Could an entire pocket of copper planchets, Philadelphia and Denver alike, have been used long after they should have been retired? Grading confirmed its authenticity. The third coin wasn't in great shape, graded EF 40, but the implications were again rattling. Unlike transitional errors confined to specific shifts in composition like 1982 or 1983, this one spanned decades. It wasn't a year of known transition. There were no overlapping compositions or alloy testing processes in 2001. Which meant that these errors were almost certainly unintentional. The result was predictable. Values began to climb. Collectors speculated, dealers sought out obscure lots, and the demand for high-resolution images of all 2001 cents surged. Marcus continued to hold his coin, now under careful insurance. Offers escalated, $38,000, then $47,000 from a private buyer in Arizona. Still, he declined. The market settled into a quiet understanding. Only a small handful of 2001 Lincoln cents struck on copper planchets had been found. Fewer still were in a condition as fine as Marcus's -58 Australian dollars example. The broader community acknowledged the coin's uniqueness, its ability to expand the scope of what was considered possible. Value estimates stabilized between $38,000 to $104,000, based on condition, confirmation of error, and provenance. What had begun as a routine evening with bankrolls had become a story of chance, attention, and quiet revelation. The 2001 penny, a coin made in billions and overlooked by millions, had become a whispered legend. A fragment of metal not just out of place, but out of time. And for collectors like Marcus, it was proof that sometimes the rarest discoveries don't come from looking for something spectacular, they come from recognizing the extraordinary in what should have been ordinary. In 2006, the U.S. Mint was running smoothly, its machinery humming with mechanical certainty as billions of coins were produced for circulation. The 1-cent penny, long a staple of American currency, was still struck with Abraham Lincoln's resolute profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial etched into the reverse. It was a coin few looked at twice. To most, it was merely pocket filler, useful only when exact change was needed, often left behind on counters or discarded in car seats. But among the many struck that year, there were a few that carried more than just the face of a president. Hidden in plain sight, they bore a flaw so rare that it would escape the eyes of the average person for years. 2006 wasn't a transitional year. The cent had remained stable since 1982 in its copper-plated zinc form. There were no new design initiatives or commemorative changes planned for the penny. It was a year of routine, of continuity. But within that consistency came a disruption, an error that wouldn't be discovered through the planning of officials or announcements from the mint, but rather through the quiet, persistent gaze of a collector who had learned to never assume a coin story was what it seemed. Leah Montrose was not a professional numismatist. She worked as a librarian and collected coins in the same way she read obscure books, out of curiosity, not profit. Most of her finds were ordinary. Wheat pennies, steel cents, the occasional foreign coin. Her evenings were often spent at her dining table, quietly sorting through rolls she picked up from the bank on weekends. It was meditative work. But one night, a 2006 penny caught her attention. It was unremarkable at first glance, but under the warm light of her desk lamp, something didn't sit right. The reverse seemed ever so slightly misaligned. The top rim of the coin was thinner than the bottom, almost imperceptibly so. She turned the coin in her hand. The steps on the Lincoln Memorial appeared doubled along the bottom row. More curiously, the coin had an unusual resonance when she dropped it gently on the table. It rang sharper, crisper than the dull thud she was used to hearing from zinc cents. Instinctively, she retrieved her digital scale. The coin weighed in at 3.11 grams, that number stopped her cold. The penny was supposed to weigh 2.5 grams, the result of its copper-plated zinc composition. A reading over 3 grams suggested a different story. Something older. Something that, by 2006, should have been extinct. She checked the scale. Calibrated and accurate. She weighed it again. Same result. Leah didn't jump to conclusions. She reached out to a small online group she belonged to, mostly hobbyists, like herself, who traded knowledge late at night across state lines. Their reactions ranged from skepticism to disbelief. A 2006 penny on a copper planchet? Not possible. Copper blanks hadn't been used in nearly a quarter century. But one user encouraged her to send it in for grading, just in case. She hesitated for days, unsure whether it was worth the trouble. Then, curiosity won, she submitted the coin to NGC, requesting metallurgical analysis in addition to authentication. The weeks dragged on slowly. Each day, she checked her email, wondering whether the coin was real, or whether she had fallen for some anomaly of oxidation or debris. Then, on a Friday afternoon, the email came. The coin had been graded -55 Australian dollars. The label read, 2006 Lincoln cent transitional error. Struck on bronze planchet. It was real. Not just a fluke, but a confirmed anomaly. The implications settled over her slowly. A copper blank, used in 2006. There were no official records of copper planchets being stored at the mint by that time. Zinc had long since taken over. The last legitimate bronze cents had been struck in 1982, phased out for cost reasons. The only explanation that made sense was an old blank, possibly hidden or misfiled for years, had finally made its way into the minting chamber in 2006. Word of the coin's existence spread quickly among serious collectors. Forums that usually argued over minor die cracks now lit up with speculation. Could there be more? Was this a rogue error or the tip of an overlooked pattern? Theories formed. Some believed the mint had simply missed a copper blank hidden deep in a storage bin, lost for years and only discovered by accident. Others theorized it had been introduced accidentally during cleaning or maintenance operations. Whatever the cause, the result was a coin that, on the surface, seemed like any other, but in truth, it was struck on material that had no business being there. The fascination deepened when a second example surfaced, this one found by a retired postal worker in Utah. It too bore the 2006 D mark, weighed in at 3.10 grams, and carried similar signs of die fatigue on the obverse. The coin was submitted and authenticated, though graded slightly lower at VF 35. It sold quietly in a private transaction for a sum that shocked Leah, just over $21,000. Offers for her coin followed. First modest, in the low thousands. Then, as awareness grew, so did the offers, $12,000, $18,500, $24,000. By the time a professional dealer reached out from Nevada with an offer of $32,000, she paused. The coin had become more than a curiosity. It had become an artifact, an accidental time traveler from the past, carrying the legacy of an old composition into a modern age. Further metallurgical analysis confirmed the composition of Leah's coin: 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc. A true bronze cent, struck at a time when such metal should have long been extinct from the mint's floors. It wasn't just an error, it was a relic, minted with ghost metal from a former era. Then came the most surprising twist. During a routine audit of grading records by a numismatic researcher compiling error trends, a third 2006 D penny showed up in the data, this one listed as MS-62. But the coin had never been publicized. Its owner remained anonymous, the coin never displayed at a show, its origin story buried in private paperwork. Its existence raised further questions. If 3 had been found, were there more? Collectors began to chase down their 2006 D pennies. Weighing scales became more common in living rooms. Roll searching took on a new urgency. eBay saw a spike in listings for high-grade 2006 cents. Most turned out to be zinc, as expected. But the hunt was on. The rarity and circumstances of Leah's coin elevated it beyond simple error classification. It wasn't a result of design experimentation or a commemorative oversight. It was the consequence of storage, inventory lapse, or sheer chance. That randomness made it irresistible. Not mass-produced rarity, but intimate, unpredictable rarity. Today, her coin is still in her possession, stored carefully, insured and encapsulated in a climate-controlled case. She has turned down an offer of $39,000 and another that would have gone as high as $48,000. She doesn't collect to sell, she explains. She collects to learn, and this coin had taught her more than any book or forum thread ever could. Numismatic experts estimate that if Leah's coin ever went to public auction, it could command between $32,000 and $92,000, depending on buyer interest and final presentation. The known number of such 2006 bronze errors remains vanishingly small: 3 confirmed examples, and perhaps a few more waiting to be found in coffee tins, couch cushions, or the forgotten corners of a desk drawer. The 2006 D penny, often overlooked, dismissed as modern and mundane, now has a place among the most intriguing modern errors. It stands as a reminder that even in the most predictable years, the mint can still surprise us. In an age of precision and control, human error and hidden history continue to find their way onto the surface of a cent. And for collectors like Leah, that quiet surprise is more valuable than the dollar signs it may eventually carry.